To 9 o'clock Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Well, it's just coming up to 9 o'clock. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GBN Tonight. Israel has launched a full siege of Gaza in retaliation to Hamas's attack against the country that's claimed the lives of 900 Israelis so far, and at least 10 Britons too. So why do some on the left find it so hard to condemn the terror group? Jewish journalist Nicole Lampert joins me shortly. Also coming up, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has pledged to rebuild Britain during her speech to Labour Party conference.
I must tell you, you cannot tax and spend your way to economic growth.
But can we really trust Starmer and Reeves with the country's purse strings? I'll explain why Britain cannot afford a Labour government. That's in my big opinion next. Then I'll get reaction from my panel tonight. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. Plus, Labour's David Lammy says he wants to date the EU and rebuild the relationship after a bitter divorce. Is this proof that Keir Starmer will spend 5 years undoing Brexit? I'll be asking the leader of Reform UK live in the studio, Richard Tice. And amid reports Prince Andrew's a lost soul and Fergie is trying to land a TV deal to keep him afloat, should King Charles forgive his brother and bring him back into the royal fold? Lady Victoria Harvey and Ingrid Seward go head-to-head in the clash. As always, you'll get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and Kelvin McKenzie is uncancelled later in the show. A blockbuster 2 hours to come. First, the news and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Well, the top story tonight is that the Israeli Prime Minister has been speaking this evening, and he said the airstrikes in Gaza are just the beginning. Speaking a short time ago, Benjamin Netanyahu compared the Hamas atrocities of the weekend as being on par with ISIS. And earlier, Hamas threatened to kill hostages if Israel continued retaliating without warning. More than 900 people have been killed so far in Israel and over 550 in Gaza since the first attack at the weekend. Israel today ordered a complete siege on Gaza, wanting to cut off food, power and fuel to the Palestinian territory. But in a significant expansion to the conflict, Hezbollah Islamists in Lebanon, to the north of Israel, have fired a salvo of rockets in what they described as revenge attacks after they said Israel killed 4 of their fighters. Well, the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, said the idea of a siege by Israel is deeply distressing.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza was extremely dire before these hostilities. It will only deteriorate exponentially. Medical equipment, food, fuel and other humanitarian supplies are desperately needed, along with access for humanitarian personnel. Relief and entry of essential supplies into Gaza must be facilitated, and the UN will continue efforts to provide aid to respond to these needs.
Well, Rishi Sunak has been attending a prayer service tonight at a synagogue as pro-Palestinian protesters demonstrated outside the Israeli embassy in London. And earlier, hundreds gathered at a Jewish community vigil in Westminster in support of Israel, with politicians expressing their cross-party support for Israel from the UK. Meanwhile, parts of the Israeli embassy appear to have been boarded up amid a pro-Palestinian demonstration outside the building with fireworks and a huge police presence. Hundreds gathered this afternoon chanting Israel is a terrorist state and free Palestine. Well, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, said the government will review its support for British nationals in the country.
Reaffirmed our support to Israel in its self-defence against this terrorist attack perpetrated by Hamas against unarmed civilians in many instances. This is an ongoing situation, and of course we will be reviewing our support to Israel and of course British nationals in Israel as the situation progresses.
Well, in politics today, the Shadow Chancellor said Labour was ready to rebuild Britain and restore economic security after what she called the chaos of the last 13 Tory years. Speaking at the Labour Party conference, Rachel Reeves said Labour planned to revamp the UK's local town planning departments in order to boost the economy.
Of the wreckage of Tory misrule, Labour will restore our economic credibility. We will lift our living standards, make work pay, rebuild our public services, invest in homegrown industries in every corner of our country, and together we will get Britain its future back.
Well, lastly, the government was busy defending today its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court. Sir James Eadie KC, representing the Home Office, told the court the policy is safe and lawful despite the East African country being less attractive to migrants than the UK. And it comes after the Court of Appeal ruled the policy was unsafe and there was a risk, they said, that Rwanda could send migrants back to their country of origin. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, addressed conference today. Worth hearing, given it's likely she'll have the keys to the Treasury in a year's time. Here she is in action.
Today, I make this commitment to you and to our country. Out of the wreckage of Tory misrule, Labour will restore our economic credibility. We will lift our living standards, make work pay, rebuild our public services, invest in homegrown industries in every corner of our country, and together we will get Britain its future back.
Well, let's start with the positives. It won't take long. Firstly, she is a credible politician, a calm, coherent, decent speaker. Compared to her boss, the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, she's Winston bloody Churchill. And she echoed the aforementioned Churchill when she said this.
I must tell you, you cannot tax and spend your way to economic growth.
I spat my tea out. At that point, I had to hit the red button on my remote control to make sure I was watching Labour Party conference. But, the rest of it struck me as trivial, a lot of posturing, a lot of hot air. One big announcement was to stop the Prime Minister using a private jet so much. Well, let me say, whoever's in charge at number 10, I want them to travel quickly and safely, not sat on a delayed train, eating a mouldy egg and cress sandwich that they've paid £7 for. This kind of superficial nonsense cheapens our politics. She does, however, pose a good question.
Questions people should ask themselves ahead of the next election are simple. Do you and your family feel better off than you did 13 years? If you, like me, believe that it is time to put security first and reject the risk of 5 more years of chaos and decline, then join us.
She's got a point. Do you feel better off after 13 years of Tory rule? I don't, and I've got no doubt you don't either. But she glosses over the small matter of 3 national lockdowns, which saw the closure of thousands of businesses and the borrowing of £500 billion. Labour share responsibility for this extraordinary economic destruction because they backed it all the way. And to make matters worse, they wanted more. Then there was the predictable snake oil language of creating jobs and investment. Governments don't create jobs, that's communism. And investment is doublespeak for more borrowed billions. When she talked about the government playing a role in de-risking certain investments to encourage the private sector, that sent a shiver down my spine. De-risking. That's you and me underwriting what could be costly and failed projects, like we saw in the 1970s. Which takes me to Labour's Green Revolution and a 1970s-style state-run energy company called Great British Energy, gambling taxpayers' billions on flaky renewables. I was delighted to hear that there will be more police and more nurses. But how are Labour going to pay for that? Well, it seems that the windfall tax and the non-dom status change will be paying for everything. Every government department will be sharing the spoils, apparently. And there'll be enough left over for a brand new pair of flip-flops for Keir Starmer. These marginal taxes are going to be doing more heavy lifting than Arnold Schwarzenegger. The windfall tax is already 75%. Did you know that? What's it going to go to? 80 or 90? Why don't we take all of their money? The bottom line is that windfall taxes are already too high, and we are in partnership with these energy firms to invest in green renewables and to explore new gas and oil resources. All they'll do is take their investment elsewhere. It's a classic Labour strategy, a great headline, but in reality, a race to the bottom. And what about this non-dom status, stopping wealthy people who are registered as living abroad paying lower taxes here? I hate to break it to the Shadow Chancellor, but these people are very mobile. So this change in status may just bring in a few $100 million by the time we're done with it. At which point we've scared off some of the richest people in the world. Do we really want them investing in New York or Paris instead? Do we really want them buying their Rolls Royces in Dubai or Singapore rather than London or Manchester? Like I say, a race to the bottom. If I was in charge, I'd make Britain a haven for rich people. We need their money. Just as Rishi Sunak has gained plaudits for slowing down the race to net zero, Labour are speeding it up, reinstating the ban on petrol and diesel cars by 2030, and with no mention of the cost to the government and ordinary Brits of pursuing this unachievable target of zero emissions. Instead, we've been told, by not granting oil and gas licences in the North Sea, which is Labour policy, we will somehow create energy security. That's like saying we're going to feed the family by locking the fridge or bricking up the larder. Well, Labour's green energy policies have got me bricking it. Now, I'm all for a bit of green energy as part of the mix, but if you think that windmills and solar panels will deliver energy security, I can't help you. One last thought. Rachel Reeves is without doubt prudent, but this gives Labour a political problem. The left within their own party and the grassroots, well, they'll all be expecting a public sector cash bonanza when they likely win the next election. And they're going to be mightily disappointed. With a probable small majority, I predict an almost immediate civil war and a party that Keir Starmer swiftly finds ungovernable. Which is why, dreadful as the Tories have been, Britain simply can't afford a Labour government. Now, what's your view? Mark at gbnews.com. The emails come straight to this laptop, so let me know your thoughts, particularly if you back Rachel Reeves' plan. Let's get the views now of my top pundits tonight. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, back from the jungle, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Let me start with you, Belinda. Were you convinced by what you heard today? After all, Rachel Reeves cuts quite a prudent figure.
Well, let's talk about the positives. I think she's a great orator, much better than Keir, but then he set the bar very low on that one. So she comes across as authentic and passionate. But to me, it's the same old anti-aspirational politics of envy Labour spiel that we normally get. You know, the attack on private schools, I think, will backfire completely because, I mean, I went to a local comprehensive, so I've got no kind of, you know, skin in that game. But for me, private schools, they take the burden off state schools, and also there are a lot of struggling middle-class families who are literally saving pennies and not going on holiday and taking extra hours just to send their kids there, and they relieve the burden of state schools. But they're going for them because it looks good, it's a good headline for the politics of envy. And as you quite rightly pointed out, the non-dom status, international wealthy people could go anywhere to spend their money. We want them to come here, but she's putting a stop to that. One thing I did like was her attempt, or I mean, I hope she's successful, in clawing back the money that was wasted, that was fraudulently used during the COVID furlough scheme. And I think that's a trick that the Tories missed. But apart from that, it's about more borrowing, 28 billion more pounds a year that we don't have. So they have to borrow that money to spend it. And the rate of borrowing and the debt it costs to the British taxpayer is higher than it has been in generations. So it's going to cost us more money. Getting rid of zero contract hours, again, I think that's removing choice from people. Zero contract hours actually suits a lot of students, elderly people who want to, you know, top up their cash income. So it's removing choice and politics of envy, and rather disappointing, and no big, exciting new policies.
Benjamin, I just wonder whether this speech today will please no one, because there's no extra spending as such. It looks like the burden will be carried by business. So the left of the party within Labour won't be happy. Meanwhile, many people think I'd be better off with the Conservatives.
Neither of those things are true, Mark. The left of the Labour Party is dead. It's not who the Labour Party is, and neither should it be. And the idea that most people are looking at the Conservatives and thinking that their pay packet or the stability of the economy will be better is nonsense. You know, Belinda talks about the 28 billion for green investment. Well, that's half what Liz Truss managed to spunk up the wall in just 1 month last year. She borrowed to do tax cuts for the rich.
Could you use a little less jungle language, please?
But, you know, I mean, Belinda, pardon me, you say you have no skin in the game on private school fees. You wouldn't be affected by a VAT on private school fees, would you?
No, my children do go to private school.
Right. So
well, three of them do.
You do have skin in the game. So you're not out of touch with that. You'd be cost more money. And the truth is that the public polling last week found that 49% of people support it, only 18% of people oppose
17%
VAT.
of English sixth formers are in private education. 17% is a lot. And where are they going to go? You just automatically think...
It's not 17, it's 7.
7%
of pupils are at private schools.
No,
and the truth is that the economy has been stagnant since before COVID. It has got nowhere. People have less money in their pocket. Growth is lower. NHS waiting lists are higher, tax is higher. All of those things were better under New Labour. In 2007, at the end of 10 years of Tony Blair, we had the highest average household incomes in the G7. Today, we have the lowest. There's only one party to blame.
OK, now I predict that with a cash bonanza for the public sector, we talked about this living wage, which I think is a laudable idea, but it's going to bring inflation back, plus extra burdens on business, such as getting rid of 0 hours contract, means that unemployment will likely go up too, Carol?
Don't know. No idea.
Those are natural consequences of these policies.
No.
If you make it hard...
Sure, but anyway.
We are talking about
There's not much left to say now.
Well, you can say anything you like.
Well, I think that I was waiting for her big economic plan. And what I heard was her talking about building programmes and putting up pylons and putting the VAT on private school fees. That's not the new era of the economy that she was going to be talking about. The biggest challenge facing this country is inflation, and she didn't mention it once. You said she was prudent before. Oh no, I think Belinda said somebody said she was prudent.
I suggested she might be.
Well, she's not, because she said today she was going to borrow 28 billion quid every year.
No, they've cancelled that plan, haven't they?
Well, she said it today, and borrowing doesn't solve money problems, it creates them. She said, and what it also does, when you borrow lots of money, Labour have been talking about this for a very long time, it creates higher inflation, it creates higher debt, it creates higher mortgages, higher interest rates. But I think Mark Carney, the former boss of the Bank of England, endorsed her plan today, and I think that's probably the end of it.
The kiss of death.
Because it was Carney. He was the guy who politicised, and some would say disgraced, his position at the Bank of England by interfering in Brexit and supporting George Osborne and being a predictor of doom and gloom for the country. And I think Rachel Reeves is not up to the job. Was you said before she's a good orator. I don't think she's at all.
She's compared to Keir.
She talks like she's got a problem. She talks like she's got a constant cold, and she's always banging on about being having been an economist at one point. Well, if this is the result of her training today, it's pretty pathetic.
OK, all right. Okay. Well, Carol, final thought. Go on.
No, it's fine.
All right. What do you think? Carol's not having the Shadow Chancellor. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.com. Delighted, by the way, with my pundits tonight, and great to see Benjamin back from the jungle. Where were you?
I went to an island called Sibiru, which is in the Indian Ocean, and there I am. And I went to live with one of Earth's last hunter-gatherer tribes. They carry. I'm on the right of that. They carry machetes at all time. And while I was there, you had to wade through the mud up to your knees in the rainforest, and I ate live maggots, which I got from trees I cut down. Right. I lived off tree bark, which you turn into a type of flower. And it was quite extraordinary because the younger ones have left for villages and have access to the internet, but the older ones have no idea that countries like...
How did you get those photographs then, if there's no cameras or whatever?
On my iPhone.
On your iPhone?
Yeah, but I had to take a charger pack to keep it going.
Because when we spoke afterwards, you said that they didn't have mirrors there, so none of them had ever seen what they look like.
Well, they've seen themselves from other visitors on occasion, but they can't see themselves normally. And so when I was filming them, they were seeing themselves for the first time in some cases.
Were you frightened? At any point?
No, I wasn't frightened. It was a thrill. But look, that way of life is about to completely disappear because the younger ones don't live like that. And so it's pretty amazing to see the last remnants of the way humans are being for thousands of years.
Yeah, people sleeping outside and stuff like that, foraging for food. It's going to be like 5 years of a Labour government.
There were snakes everywhere. It's like GB News.
Yeah, well, by the way, were the snakes scared of you, or were you scared of them?
I think they were scared of me. But look, with Ozempic sold out, I needed a new way to lose weight.
Well, look, it's great to have you back. Still to come, Israel has launched a full siege of Gaza in retaliation to Hamas's attack against the country that's claimed the lives of 900 Israelis so far and at least 10 Britons. So why do some on the left find it so hard to condemn the terror group? Jewish journalist Nicole Lampert joins me live shortly, but next in a clash, amid reports Prince Andrew's a lost soul and claims that Fergie is trying to land a TV deal to keep him afloat, should King Charles forgive his brother and bring him back to the royal fold? Lady Victoria Harvey and Ingrid Seward go head-to-head. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Can Labour be trusted with the economy? Well, this from Lee. Good evening, Mark. I was a Labour voter and member for 18 years until recently. With all the U-turns that Labour announced, I cannot put my trust in them to keep anything they say anymore. For the first time in my life, I may actually vote for someone different. But who are the least worst? You do wonder, don't you? Look, I'll get to more of your emails very shortly. But let's now have a look ahead. What's coming up in the next few minutes? Reform UK leader and GB News star Richard Tice is on his way, but first it's time for The Clash. Now, the Duchess of York is working on landing a money-spinning US chat show in a bid to help her ex-husband Prince Andrew pay his mounting bills. TV producer Amy Rosenblum told the Mail on Sunday that she met Sarah Ferguson at New York's Regency Hotel last month to discuss the plans that could reportedly bank millions a year. Sarah Ferguson is reportedly keen to help bankroll £2 million worth of essential maintenance work at the Royal Lodge after Andrew himself forked out £200,000 for urgent roof repairs, a move that helped him avoid an embarrassing eviction by the King. Prince Andrew was stripped of his royal duties and patronages in 2020, but has vigorously and consistently denied all allegations levelled at him by Jeffrey Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre. So tonight, should King Charles forgive Prince Andrew and bring him back into the royal fold? Let me know your thoughts at GB News on Twitter or mark@gbnews.com. I'll bring you the results of our poll shortly, but to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome socialite and Prince Andrew's ex, Lady Victoria Harvey, and the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward. Ingrid, let me start with you. Is it time for Charles to forgive and forget?
Well, I don't think that the King ever had to forgive Andrew. I actually really feel that he believes his brother, but he simply cannot allow him to come back into public life, because it's not necessarily what you've done or haven't done, it's what you're perceived to have done. And globally, the world perceives Andrew to have done the things that he's been accused of. They see him as being a predator on young women, and they see him as someone who's very entitled with a great deal of money, or he probably doesn't have that too much anymore, running that house. But I think that it's absolutely impossible for his brother as king to bring him back when the people of not just Great Britain, but the world simply will not see it that way, regardless of what happens. He's tarred by this Epstein scandal, and I don't think he can come back into public life in any way, and certainly not expect his brother to bring him back.
Well, I just wonder whether King Charles should bury the hatchet, Victoria. After all, Andrew is guilty of no crime.
No, he's never been proven to have done anything wrong. I mean, this was just, judged by the media. There's been actually a lot of developments in the last 5 weeks. There was a letter filed to the court in the Northern District of Illinois by a main whistleblower witness in this case that basically says that Virginia Giuffre is a liar, and so is Maria Farmer, and that the whole case is going to be turned upside down. So there's a lot going to be coming out. They're working with the FBI at the moment, especially in this new FBI case that was filed by Maria Farmer and Sarah Ransom a couple months ago. And so I do believe that he will be completely exonerated when all of this comes to light, which is actually very soon. It's kind of happening very fast right now.
Well, I'm certain that Virginia Giuffre would push back on the idea that she's a liar. She would no doubt deny that. She's not here to defend herself,
Mark,
of course, Victoria.
There's undeniable proof that Virginia Giuffre is a con artist liar and that Maria Farmer is a con artist liar, and actually Ghislaine Maxwell is also innocent. So,
well, Victoria, you know, fair play. This show is all about opinions. You're entitled to yours, but I haven't seen that evidence, so I don't think we can debate that.
This is actually straight evidence that is undeniable. So.
OK, well, she's not here. Virginia Giuffre, of course, hasn't got the ability to respond to that.
Innocent. She has been completely set up and is sitting in jail innocent as well. So that will be coming out.
Well, Victoria, of course, you know, the truth will out in time, but I've got no doubt, as I say, that Virginia Giuffre would deny what you've said, and we have reached out to her people, and let's hope we can get her on in the future.
I would love to be on with her.
Ingrid, what do you think about the politics of this? Because if Charles doesn't resolve the Andrew drama, the Andrew soap opera, it could dog his monarchy, couldn't it?
I don't think it will dog the monarchy. What he's done, really, and I do agree with what Lady V has said, a lot of what she said, but I still feel these things don't happen quickly, even if, for instance, Giuffre was proven to be a liar. This is not going to happen overnight.
I will bet my life on it. Okay.
But Charles cannot get involved. He cannot get involved in this. He's our head of state. He cannot be seen as a meddler, especially in his own brother's life.
But Ingrid, where's the loyalty to your own brother? Blood is thicker than water. He's thrown his brother under the bus.
No, he hasn't. His brother threw himself under the bus. And I absolutely think that Charles has been loyal to his brother in private, but publicly, he's our head of state, and he cannot be seen to condone what his brother has done when everybody else has said, no, that's enough. And I think Andrew probably could reform himself in some way, but I think he'd have to disappear for a while and come back and live very simply, living in his 30-room mansion, Royal Lodge. It's not going to, well, that's what it says on everywhere. 30 rooms, not 30 bedrooms, 30 rooms. It's a really big house.
Okay.
It's got 98 acres. It costs a fortune to run. I think if Andrew was to be a little bit more sort of modest.
I mean, he has disappeared for how many years now? He's lost his life because of this woman who has falsely accused him and has falsely accused many other people. There's a lot of people that you haven't even heard about that is ongoing lawsuits. There is an extortion criminal ring run by David Boies. Like, this is the situation.
Well, I don't, of course, have access to that allegation, and I can't back that up. But can I finally ask you, Victoria, do you think there is any way back for Prince Andrew, given the fact that you think he's been stitched up like a right royal kipper?
I think
he'll be back?
I think that the proof that will be coming out, I think once that comes out, people are going to see that this guy was completely set up, and the level of how he was set up. I mean,
if that's demonstrated, will Charles forgive and forget? Are you suggesting that he may make a glorious return to front life?
I really hope so. And anyone wanting to know more about this case, just look into George Tonks, who is the whistleblower. There's a lot on his Twitter account talking about it. And there's a lot of things that are going to be, finally, I think the truth is going to come out, because it's not going to be able to be avoided.
My thanks to Lady Victoria Harvey and the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward. Well, who do you agree with? Should King Charles forgive and forget in terms of Andrew and bring him back into the public fold? Neil on Twitter says it seems like King Charles has already forgiven him, but luckily the British public has morals, and the backlash from Andrew coming back into the fold would be too great a risk for the king. Lisa says Prince Andrew's never been arrested, never been found guilty of any crime, but the press and social media have already decided he's guilty and have made it harder for the king to ever welcome him back. Matt says, but what about the things Andrew has been accused of? Maybe Charles could consider the allegations before he publicly welcomes Andrew back. So your verdict is in. 16% agree that King Charles should forgive Prince Andrew, and 84% of you are not having it. Coming up, Labour's David Lammy says he wants to date the EU and rebuild the relationship after a bitter divorce. Is this proof that Sir Keir Starmer will spend 5 years undoing Brexit? I'll be asking the leader of Reform UK live in the studio, still buzzing from his conference, Richard Tice. But next, Israel has launched a full siege of Gaza in retaliation to Hamas's attack against the country that's claimed the lives of 900 Israelis and at least 10 Britons. So, why do some on the left find it so hard to condemn the terror group? Jewish journalist Nicole Lampert is next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Richard Tice coming up very soon, but first it's time for journalist Nicole Lampert. Worsening scenes of violence in Israel in recent days have sent shockwaves around the world, with over 900 Israelis now killed and many thousands more injured or missing after Hamas terrorists broke across the border from Gaza, where they've held power since 2007. More than 680 people have also been killed in Israeli strikes on Gaza in retaliation. But despite widespread evidence of Israeli women and children and elderly people being kidnapped and killed by Hamas terrorists, many on the left seem reluctant to condemn the attacks, with former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn skirting around the issue yesterday.
Wait a minute. Why you interrupt people when they're answering a question? Okay. Thank you. I'll go again then. Yesterday I sent out a statement calling for a ceasefire, calling for peace, and calling for an end to the occupation of Palestine, which of course is fundamentally the background to the whole issue. Obviously, all attacks are wrong.
But do you
Thank you. I think I've made my
Hamas?
point. I think I've made my point very clear.
You haven't quite made the point.
No, wait a minute.
What the man is saying is...
Well, the journalist Nicole Lambert joins me now. And Nicole, thank you for joining us under these awful circumstances. I understand you were at a vigil earlier today, close to Downing Street.
Yeah.
What was the mood?
Sombre. It was sad, but also there were quite a few MPs there, and they pledged to support Israel. That felt good to know. It hasn't always felt like that in this country. And there was sadness, and there was also just the kind of feeling of, you know, we can't give up. This is our homeland. This is the only homeland that the Jewish people have.
The only democracy in the region.
The only democracy in the region. And of course, after the Holocaust, we know what can happen if Israel doesn't have its own country and if there isn't a place for Jews to flee to. And Jews have been fleeing there since its inception.
Well, indeed, I spoke just a couple of days ago to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and he said rooted in this is not the fight for freedom or anything like that. It is out-and-out anti-Semitism. It's hatred of Jewish people.
Well, they don't want any Jewish people on what they deem Arab land, and that's one of the big issues, in that you can only talk peace for people who want to have peace with you.
Yeah.
But if most Jews, certainly most British Jews and most people in Israel believe or believed in the two-state solution, but that's become... That idea has disappeared because it's become clearer and clearer that the other side don't want a two-state solution because they don't want to share the land with Jews. They don't believe Jews deserve to be there. They don't like to be on an equal footing with Jews. There were Jews in the Middle East for many thousands of years, and they were known as dhimmi. They had dhimmi status, which is second-class status.
How does it make you feel as a Jewish person yourself to see people in London and across the country waving the Palestinian flag, cheering about what's happened, which, let's not forget, involves the rape and massacre of innocent civilians, children, women, elderly people, and indeed support for what's happened outside of Labour Party conference in Liverpool today?
Well, even at the vigil this evening, there were people that were on the outskirts. There were a lot of police there, but there were people there with Palestinian flags. And I understand why people want to support the Palestinians. I'm not against the Palestinians.
Hamas, which is a terror group, and the people of Palestine need to be understood as two separate entities.
Yeah, and
there is support among some Palestinians for Hamas, but not universal by any means.
Exactly. And the Palestinians are really victims of their own leaders. They're victims of Hamas, which are a fascist organisation. They restrict free speech. You're imprisoned. They kill their political rivals. And Fatah, on the other side, while they're deemed more moderate, they still also won't have elections. They're not democratic. They don't allow free speech.
Now, let's have it right. The Labour Party has changed under Keir Starmer. He's worked hard, I think, to rid the Labour Party, the movement, of the scourge of anti-Semitism. And they instantly condemned this attack by Hamas, which is recognised by the British government and the EU and others as a terror organisation. They're not militants, as the BBC have described them. Let's have a listen to what David Lammy has had to say.
There is never a justification for terrorism. Labour stands firmly in support of Israel's right to defend itself, rescue hostages and protect its citizens. The hostages so cruelly taken, including children, should be released immediately, and Hamas's indiscriminate attacks set back the cause of peace.
OK, that was David Lammy. So Labour have acted very quickly on this, which they likely wouldn't have done if they were still led by Jeremy Corbyn, who came that close to becoming Prime Minister, which I would have thought sends a shiver down your spine. However, why do some other figures on the left have such difficulty in condemning Hamas, these murderous thugs?
Well, I think, first of all, there is on the left, there's anti-Semitism. Of course, it is in all parts of society, but there's always been a stream of anti-Semitism. It's in Karl Marx, even, who was born Jewish. So there is that. And then, of course, they see the Palestinians, they see it as a David and Goliath situation. They see it as a kind of apartheid situation. And in some ways, it can be seen that way. If you look at Israel on the map and then you look at the tiny parts, there's Gaza and then there's the West Bank, you know, and they're small. Then you zoom out and you've got the whole rest of the Middle East that have been to war on the behalf of the Palestinians many times. You've got Syria, you've got Egypt, you've got Jordan, you've got Lebanon, and I think one of the problems, one of the questions that we have now is whether Lebanon joins in and Hezbollah in Lebanon to join with the Palestinians. And then we'll see that actually Israel, and to us as Jews, there are 14 million of us in the world, over half live in Israel, that we feel very much that we're a tiny, tiny minority. And we feel that in this country too. It's good to see David Lammy say those things. Yeah. I do wonder whether he would have said them if Jeremy Corbyn was leader.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining us on this very, very sad day and this most dreadful and appalling story. And my thanks to Nicole Lampert. We'll look at lots more to come, let me tell you. Don't forget the email is mark@gbnews.com for your reaction. Coming up, as Steve Coogan launches a defence of the BBC, are they guilty of rewriting their history with their latest Jimmy Savile drama? I'll be asking Fleet Street legend Kelvin MacKenzie. But next, David Lammy, who you've just seen, is flirting with the EU again. He says he wants to date the EU. So is this proof the party will spend 5 years undoing Brexit? I'll be asking the leader of Reform UK. Live in the studio, Richard Tice. He's next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Just whispering there to my next guest. Welcome back to the show. Kelvin MacKenzie later on tonight, but it's time now for GB News star and leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. And David Lammy sensationally admitted that Britain would start dating the EU under a Labour government. The Shadow Foreign Secretary was speaking at a conference fringe event hosted by the Tony Blair Institute, and he told the audience, "We had a very, very bitter divorce with the EU. It's a divorce that went on for years and years and years. No one in this room, in all seriousness, would suggest you can have a divorce and that you could get married again without even going on a date." What's he on about? My goodness. Talking in riddles. Well, Richard, is this proof that if Labour get into power, they will spend 5 years undoing Brexit?
I think actually he's really exposed himself. The reality is that he wants a long dating process ahead of remarrying the entity that we have just left.
He said the bad bit out loud.
Absolutely, and you can see it clear as day. Frankly, I think this is a moment where we should have very rapid speed dating and say, have a look, hello, thank you, bye. We don't like that actually because you're in recession, you're struggling, and that's the reality. Why would you want to get closer and handcuff and tie yourself to an entity where the main countries like Germany are in recession, really struggling? They're now essentially demolishing wind farms in order to extract coal again because they've got themselves in such an absolute pickle. There's no growth across the main countries in Europe. Labour have actually worked out that you've got to talk about growth. I've been banging on about it for the last 2 years. I think they're absolutely clueless because all of their policies, whether it's tying yourself to the EU, whether it's obsessed with the madness of the job-destroying, money-destructing net zero, will destroy growth. It won't create growth. And that's what the country has got to realise and challenge Labour on. And because they set out no policies that will create growth.
How much can be done in power over 5 years? To what extent can Labour reconnect us with the EU and undo Brexit? How much can be done and how much is irreversible?
Well, that's a very good question.
We are out, so why should we worry?
Well, I'll tell you why, because the reality is, yes, legally we've left, but we haven't taken advantage of the fantastic Brexit opportunities out there. The whole point was you take back control of your laws, money and borders. Well, we've opened our borders to mass migration, we haven't deregulated, and we haven't cut taxes in order to create growth, and therefore our growth is spluttering, slightly better than Germany's, whereas take the US, for example, they're soaring away again, and that's because they've got lower regulations, daft regulations, and they've got lower taxes, and they've got cheap energy because they use their own shale gas.
Yeah.
And we refuse to use this great treasure trove under our feet called oil, gas, shale gas. We've even got a bunch of lithium we're not using. Yeah. But the whole thing's insane.
We've got decades of oil, decades of coal, decades of gas. We've got at least 20 years of gas.
And we, the taxpayer, own it. So we should actually extract it and get the benefit from it, rather than leave it as an untapped asset underground and send our money overseas to buy someone else's gas.
But aren't Labour entitled to flirt with the EU? After all, they're our biggest trading partner, and they just want to make that relationship work better for the British people.
Everyone bangs on about being our biggest trading partner. They're not. Our single biggest trading partner is the United States of America, with whom we have a large trade
biggest
surplus.
Market. I think it's the biggest market we've got access to.
And we've got a free trade deal with them. But it's still not the biggest part of our economy. I think it's about 11 or 12% of our overall economy. Look, but it's not a growing market. Focus on where the growth is. The growth is in the US. The growth is in Asia, where we've just done a big trade deal.
Sure, but why this antipathy to collaborating with the Europeans?
We are collaborating with them. We've got a free trade deal with them. And yes, frankly, they've been a right pain in the backside in terms of the way they interpret some of the rules and the regulations. We've been daft enough to sign up to an even more burdensome Windsor framework than the previous horrific protocol. And we should just tell them we're not going to do this stuff.
So, but Labour would argue they're going to fix our relationship with the EU so that actually we can collaborate on controlling the migrants crisis, because that's a shared problem, and that actually engaging with Europe will boost our economy. That's what Labour say.
They do say that, but the reality is, I'll just repeat it again, the EU main nations are in recession, so you don't want to get closer to something that is spluttering and coughing and struggling and in recession. You want to get as far away from it and focus on where there's growth, because that's how we get growth.
Let me tell you that you did not splutter or cough this weekend. I watched various speeches from your conference. I thought you spoke brilliantly, very direct. You shot from the hip, very authentic stuff. Tell me about the plans, the ambitions of your party. What does success look like at the next election?
Well, the first success was on Saturday because we had more people, almost 1,000 people in the main hall, which was, apart from the Prime Minister's speech, it was busier than the main hall in the Conservative Party in Manchester.
Donald Trump 1,000 people was like actually 38.
No, this is a Richard Tice 1,000 people, so it might have been 999, but, you know, I tell it as it is.
Great attendance.
Great attendance, and look, the mood was fantastic, and we've got many, many hundreds of candidates, and I repeat, we're standing everywhere in England, Scotland and Wales, and we will give people a proper democratic range of options, different policies, the right common sense policies, and that will make a difference.
Low tax, stop the boats.
Low tax, stop the boats. We're the only people with a credible policy that will stop the boats. We know it works, because it worked 10 years ago for Australia, and guess what? The boats haven't come back. So why not
by
copy
breaking
what we know works?
international law?
No, they didn't break international law.
They got
a bit of flack from a bunch of woke lefties, but actually they didn't break international law. We should do the same. We can do it within the existing treaties. I've read these treaties. I know it's a pretty dull old read, but I've read these treaties, and we're entitled to do it. It requires leadership and courage, Mark, about which this Conservative government has none.
And you are a brand new star on GB News, leader of a national political party, hoping to move the dial in a year's time. Are you having fun at the People's Channel?
Huge fun at the People's Channel, and it's great because I get recognised now all over the country. It's extraordinary. I go and talk to events and things. People say, I've seen you. It's you. I see you on GB News. And it's amazing. The exponential growth is something that everybody should be incredibly excited about.
Have you got groupies?
Have I got groupies? Oh, I couldn't possibly comment.
There you go. A diplomatic answer. Richard, we'll catch up really soon. My thanks to Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK. Lots more to get through. A busy hour to come. Is Labour's botched attempt at providing toilets for all at the party conference another example of the attempted erasure of women from our society? What do you think about these unisex toilets? Are they an insult to women? Leading women's rights campaigner Maya Forstater certainly thinks so, and she joins me live shortly. But next, it's Sir Keir Starmer's admission that he would scrap the Rwanda plan, even if it works, proof that Labour will open Britain's borders. My panel will debate that very shortly. So don't forget also the email is mark@gbnews.com. It's all about your opinions. If you're enjoying the show, and if you're enjoying the channel, and if you're enjoying Richard Tice, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We'll see some patchy low cloud and fog developing, particularly across southern parts of England and Wales, but further heavy rain pushing into Scotland. That's courtesy of weather fronts pushing through over the next few days. This weather front, a dividing line between warm air to the south and colder air trying to come into the north by the middle of the week. We've already got that cloud and rain spilling into parts of Northern Ireland, pushing into western Scotland as we move through this evening into the early hours. Elsewhere, turning quite grey. There'll be some mist and low cloud developing by the end of the night, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. And fairly mild temperatures for all staying up in double figures. So it's a wet start across Scotland to start Tuesday morning. Outbreaks of heavy rain, which will continue to push slowly southeastwards through the day here, so we could see some further flooding issues. Brightening up across parts of England and Wales, some low cloud though lingering across southern counties. Plenty of hazy sunshine here, lifting temperatures to around 23 or 24. Turning increasingly windy across the northern half of the UK as weather fronts push in. Those weather fronts slowly push their way southwards into Wednesday, turning heavy at times, particularly across parts of Wales. Further north, brighter sunny spells and scattered showers, particularly across northwest Scotland. Some of these heavy at times, quite muggy across southern parts of the UK under that cloud and rain. A bit fresher further north and turning cooler as we head towards the weekend.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock, I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News Tonight. Now, Britain's borders are once again threatened by the Labour Party. With hundreds of illegal migrants landing on our shores yesterday, Starmer has admitted he will scrap the government's no-nonsense Rwanda plan, even if it's successful. So is Sir Keir's Rwanda reluctance proof that this Labour Party intends to throw open Britain's borders? That's the big debate with my superstar panel next. Tonight, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. And from borders to bogs, Labour Party conference has caused outrage as a result of the unisex toilets that people are forced to use. Take a listen to Lesbian Labour, who have been saying that they're furious about these toilets for everyone, which saw men's urinals covered with curtains and the floor, and I quote, awash with male pee. Leading women's rights campaigner Maya Forstater asks if this is a sinister sign of things to come in Labour's war against women. Also coming up, as the government promises a clampdown on Sick Note Britain, are some employees now exploiting mental health as an excuse not to go to work? We'll get stuck into that in the media buzz. And later in the show, with actor Steve Coogan defending the BBC's latest Jimmy Savile drama, is our state broadcaster guilty of rewriting their own checkered history? I'll be asking the Wolf of Fleet Street, Kelvin Mackenzie. Plus, we will crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. Plus, tomorrow's front pages. So, a busy hour to come. Keir Starmer wants to cancel the Rwanda plan, even if it works. We'll debate that after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the main story tonight is that the Israeli Prime Minister says the atrocities committed by Hamas during its attack on Israel mirrored those carried out by ISIS. Speaking this evening, Benjamin Netanyahu issued a televised statement saying that the airstrikes in Gaza are just the beginning of Israel's retaliation. Well, earlier, Hamas threatened to kill Israeli hostages if Israel continued to bomb Gaza without warning. More than 900 people have been killed in Israel so far and over 550 in Gaza since the first attack on Saturday. And in a significant expansion to the conflict, Hezbollah Islamists in Lebanon, which is north of Israel, have fired rockets in what they describe as revenge attacks for Israel, killing 4 of their fighters. Meanwhile, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters have been demonstrating outside the Israeli embassy in central London tonight. Amid waving Palestinian flags and Free Palestine banners, fireworks were let off, flares were lit, and chants of "Israel is a terrorist state" rang out. The Metropolitan Police says it is engaging with protesters and looking into incidents of suspected criminal damage. But the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been attending a prayer service in a synagogue in North London tonight, reaffirming the UK's unwavering support for Israel, saying he stands with the Jewish community and the barbaric acts committed by Hamas, he said, were evil. And the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, earlier on today said the government will review its support now for British nationals in the country.
We reaffirmed our support to Israel in its self-defence against this terrorist attack perpetrated by Hamas against unarmed civilians in many instances. This is an ongoing situation, and of course we will be reviewing our support to Israel and of course British nationals in Israel as the situation progresses.
Well, in politics today, the Shadow Chancellor said Labour was ready to rebuild Britain and restore economic security after what she called the chaos of the Tory years. Speaking at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, Rachel Reeves said Labour plan to revamp the UK's local town planning departments in order to boost the economy.
Out of the wreckage of Tory misrule, Labour will restore our economic credibility. We will lift our living standards, make work pay, rebuild our public services, invest in homegrown industries in every corner of our country, and together we will get Britain its future back.
Rachel Reeves. Now, the government has been defending its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Supreme Court today. Sir James EDKC, representing the Home Office, told the court the policy is safe and is lawful, despite the East African country being less attractive to migrants than the UK. It comes after the Court of Appeal ruled the policy was unsafe, as they said there was a risk that Rwanda could send migrants back to their country of origin. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz, and let's kick off with a first look at some of the front pages. And for now, we will just start with the Metro. Trapped in hell. First Minister Humza Yousaf in Scotland has spoken of his fears for his wife's parents as he revealed they are trapped in war-torn Gaza after visiting family. OK, I'll bring you more front pages very shortly, but let's react to the big stories of the day in the company of top Daily Express columnist, always a must-read and a must-listen, Carol Malone. Don't keep her hanging, let me tell you. Journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Back from the jungle. He got bitten, but he also bit.
And that was here.
Too right. The Euston Road. And last but not least, the brilliant former Brexit Party MEP, Belinda de Lucy. Now, as illegal migrants continue to arrive on our shores, with 238 making the crossings from France yesterday, government lawyers were in court today attempting to overturn a previous ruling that blocked the Rwanda migration policy. But in an interview at the Labour Party conference yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer continued to bury his head in the sand by declaring that he would scrap the Rwanda scheme even if it works. You heard me right. Take a listen.
If the Supreme Court rules it is legal, and flights to Rwanda begin to take off, and the numbers crossing the channel on small boats decline, i.e., so it's working, would you still reverse it?
Yes.
Why?
I think it's the wrong policy. It's hugely expensive.
There you go. Quite a revelation. Carol, is Keir Starmer being refreshingly honest, or is he dropped the ball
An
here?
absolute idiot. Although that said, I love what he said. I love that because he's single-handedly crashing his chances of winning the next election. You know, to win the next election, he needs to win back the red wall. And he must surely know, having read the post, he must know that 3/4 of the Red Wall wholeheartedly support the Rwanda plan. More than half of them support people who are coming here illegally, coming through safe countries. They wholeheartedly support them being sent back. They support the boats being turned back. So when he says things like, you know, even if the Rwanda scheme works, he's going to stop it. Who's he going to stop it for? He said it's the wrong policy. Wrong who for? Is it wrong for Labour's elitists, the Islington set? It's not wrong for the people in the communities all over this country whose lives have been turned upside down in areas where their essential services don't work anymore because they've had 300, 400, 500 people dumped on their doorsteps. So Starmer is, you know, he doesn't understand who his core voters are. He doesn't understand who the people are that he needs to win the election, and he sure as hell doesn't know what they think about immigration. Starmer and this very small elite in his party, they want to have completely open borders. They want to welcome every single migrant who comes on a boat. They want to give them a home here. That's not what the vast swathe of this country wants. They want to allow people coming here who are fleeing war and persecution, but we're a very pro-immigration country on that score, pro-refugees. But what we're not pro is having the system scammed by a load of economic migrants and us having to pay the bill, which last year was $3.2 billion.
Yes, well, look, I don't think I can argue with that, Benjamin. And I agree that I wonder whether Keir Starmer does not want to become Prime Minister, because in the last few weeks, he's told a Canadian conference of lefties that he wants to align with EU regulations. He wants a deal with Brussels to tackle the migrant crisis, which could involve a quota of 100,000 people a year and the rest. And now he admits that he'll axe the Rwanda plan, even if it's working.
Well, anybody who wants to tackle illegal immigration or refugees coming over in boats would be mad to vote in the Tories and Suella Braverman again. You know, Suella Braverman has spent the last year saying she'll stop the boats, and we have more boats than ever.
What's his plan, then?
You know, they said they'd stop the boats. The only thing they managed to stop is the trains. I think that's how confused they got.
Do you know what his plan is?
Well, we know that the Rwanda plan doesn't work because so far nobody has been deported, and it's cost 140 million
because it's been blocked by the courts.
Which they knew from the start. Because all this was a ruse to stir up publicity and try and divide people, not to solve problems.
How many other policies will Keir Starmer axe that are proven to work?
Well, it's not proven to work. That's the whole point.
He said he told Victoria Derbyshire.
He said if it is proven to work, he will still abandon it because he doesn't think it's the right policy. But he omitted to say what the right policy was.
Carol, I mean, you know, you're brighter than that. We've had this for God knows how long, and it hasn't
Well, it hasn't worked because it's now this week in the Supreme Court, who hopefully will give it the nod. And that's why we passed the illegal immigration
bill. The question was hypothetical. He was asked, if it works, will you axe it? And he said, yes, I will, because it's ideological, because he wants to keep his friends in Islington happy.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, Boris Johnson lived in Islington the whole time he was Prime Minister, so that's just, you know, ridiculous slur. But you know what?
That probably brought the house prices down.
The cost of taking each immigrant or each refugee to Rwanda is as much as educating a child at Eton for a whole year. I think any serious politician would look at that and say that is not a good use of public money.
Benjamin talks about serious politicians. It's hysterical because Keir believes the solution to the migrant crisis lies in the dark corridors of Brussels, lies with an EU that has failed its people over the migrant crisis, so much so that Maloney, from an EU state, has had to reach over... Maloney,
it's your new nickname.
An EU state has had to reach over to Brexitee Britain for help because she finds no solace, no comfort, no help from the EU. The EU's solutions to the migrant crisis is bribe countries and what we do with them once we get here, once they get here. And Keir is putting the fate of this country in the EU's hands. And to say that he wants to stop it if it's successful is literally saying open borders, open borders. He is a danger to this country with that attitude.
Europe are now saying they want a Rwanda plan.
Yes.
Germany has just stopped. They've said no more refugees. Other European countries are saying we want to be able to send people to another country. And funny enough, Labour, when Labour were last in power, was it Jack Straw? He said all people coming from different countries should be processed processed outside. So why have they suddenly changed their tune?
Indeed, and former Home Secretary John Reid is the guy that coined the term hostile environment. It was a Labour Home Secretary who coined that term. And actually, the British people want this country to be a hostile environment to people that are trying to come here illegally.
I mean, Theresa May said only about 3 weeks ago that she regretted her use of that term. But look, you know, I can see why Belinda's career...
She's gone woke, hasn't she?
I can see why Belinda's career as a marriage counsellor didn't last very long, because you can't just scream at the other half. You have to sit and listen and negotiate.
But hang on,
and I think Keir Starmer is being mature. You're not going to solve this without France.
Benjamin, the far-right is on the rise in Europe. You wait till the May elections next year.
You probably support them.
Far-right is just wanting your country to make its own laws to you lot. But next year in May, the EU elections just see the rise of the far-right, because they are so upset with the EU's failure in this. And Keir is wanting them to help.
But you sit here supporting it. You support the people that let the boats in.
We're the only country that so far does not have a far-right party.
Exactly.
But you know what? It could happen, because if we let people down, if we keep on letting people down in this country and do nothing about illegal
and calling everyone far-right.
We have a far-right party and they're in government.
We do not.
Because Suella Braverman stirs racial hate.
They were called the Consocialists by Richard Tice this weekend. Carol, briefly, if you can.
UK,
Carol, briefly, if you can. We had to discuss Rachel Reeves, because she might be the next Chancellor, probably will be. We have to discuss Keir Starmer, because he'll probably be our next Prime Minister. I'm worried about his diabolical political judgment. This is a guy that can be guaranteed to pick the wrong end of every argument.
Completely. They don't call him as a flip-flop or nothing. You know what? He's a dull bureaucrat who shouldn't be the leader of the Labour Party. When he was standing next to Corbyn, he looked quite good, because he wore a decent suit and he had a decent haircut.
And he wasn't a communist.
And he wasn't a communist. And he kind of was, because he completely... It was only 2 years ago he was saying what a great pal Corbyn was, how he was great friends with him, and how he would have made a very good Prime Minister. Have we forgotten that?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think he's weak. I don't think he has any policy. He has no coherent strategy for almost anything. And I think his problem is going to be that... I think the Tories' problem with him and Labour is that Labour have been out of power so long, we've forgotten how bad they were.
Well, economic growth was much higher under the last Labour government, and the number of illegal refugees was much lower. So how can you say they've forgotten how bad it was?
Because there've been problems in Europe since, and you know that with Syria, which opened corridors to allow people to come
And Angela
here.
Merkel saying, come on in, world, to Europe.
Yes, a million.
You know, there's only one political leader of modern times more unpopular than Jeremy Corbyn, and that's Liz Truss. So to quote Tony Blair, at least Labour had the decency to do their crazy period in opposition.
Wanted to rub the
the Tories ruined the country.
She's not Prime Minister anymore. She was Prime Minister for 44 days. Do you not worry about Keir Starmer's judgment, saying things out loud that the public will hate?
No, because the public don't support Rwanda.
Where'd you get that from?
The public support tackling illegal refugees.
Look at the polls.
But they know that Rwanda is a ruse that is wasting public money, spaffing it up the wall, you might say.
You're so wrong. The polling says the Red Wall and working-class constituencies support Rwanda wholeheartedly, 3/4 of them.
And we know that Rwanda isn't working. It's not working because
it's a chance to work.
It clearly isn't legal so
Keir
far.
Starmer has said that he will axe Rwanda even if it works. You have been hung, drawn and quartered, right? Game, set and match. Can I ask you, though, why is it that Labour are so disconnected from working-class voters? Because the push for net zero, they've reversed the ban on petrol and diesel cars, so now people are going to find the money in 2030, not 2035. Net zero is going to cost the country and it's going to cost ordinary working people. Why don't Labour care?
Well, you're, of course, not looking at the polling, which shows there's been a massive shift. I don't think there's a single Red Wall constituency that is not expected to turn from Conservative to Labour, and for the last year, it's completely wrong.
Okay.
Labour is in the high 40s, and the truth is, you know, people look at a billionaire like Rishi Sunak and his tax-dodging wife, and they can see that they're out of touch.
The question that Starmer really needs to answer at the Labour Party conference this week is why us and not them, and I don't think he's got an answer for that.
Okay.
I think he's a sensible man, and we need that.
Your reaction, please, mark at gbnews.com. Next up, from borders to bogs, Labour's party conference triggers outrage from their own campaign group, Lesbian Labour, over the event's gender-neutral toilets for everyone, which saw men's urinals covered with curtains and the floor, and I hate to quote this word, but awash with male pee. Leading women's rights campaigner Maya Forstater asks if this is a sinister sign of things to come in Labour's war against women. Is it an insult to women? We'll discuss that next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Fleet Street kingpin Kelvin MacKenzie is waiting in the wings, but first, it's the formidable women's rights campaigner Maya Forstater, who won a landmark legal case against her former employer for unfair dismissal last year, losing her job after tweeting that biological women could not change their sex. Well, the war on women shows no sign of slowing, as gender-neutral toilets for everybody at this weekend's Labour Party conference in Liverpool drew widespread condemnation. The campaign group Lesbian Labour slammed the facilities for being awash with male pee after urinals in the unisex loos were hidden with black curtains, whilst Maya herself went viral on Twitter after simply stating women do not want to have to sit on toilet seats that men have peed on. Well, Maya, great to have you on the show, privileged to have you on the programme. What's your view on this? I mean, if these cubicles are self-locking, what's the problem?
it's an insult to women. They're not unisex cubicles. They're not designed to be unisex cubicles. It's a great big conference venue that has unisex toilets, it has men's toilets, and it has women's toilets. You know when you're in the men's toilets because there are urinals there. But somehow that wasn't enough. They had to make more of the single-sex toilets into unisex toilets, including covering up the urinals with a black curtain. So that means that men can't just get in, get out, have a wee quickly. The men are forced into the cubicles. They wee all over the seat. Then women have to go in and sit on it. It's not. It's just not nice, and it's an insult to women to put them through that when the conference centre's not designed. It's designed to have men's toilets and women's toilets because that's what people feel comfortable with.
Completely right. And Maya, I would suggest a visit to the restrooms isn't only about going to the loo, is it? The whole space, including the sinks and the mirror, it's a place where women can convene and I guess let their guard down.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just a very basic thing. You don't expect to feel unsafe and wary when you're going to the toilet. It's not, it's not the highlight of the weekend, but you just expect it to be safe, to be private, and to be clear where the men and where the women are to go. And they put out these great big signs that said toilets for everybody with pride symbols on them, and said, if you don't feel safe, talk to the staff. But they should have just left it as it was, with men's toilets, women's toilets, and unisex. That's what toilets for everybody means, not forcing people to share toilets when most people really don't want to.
Does this feel to you, Maya, like an agenda, sort of normalising the idea that our gender is an abstract thing?
Yes, I mean, I think, there's a war on this within the Labour Party, as there is within every party. There are people who really want to push the idea that gender is fluid, that just saying that there are two sexes is, makes you a bigot and a Nazi. I mean, there were women outside the conference wanting to speak about single-sex services, about women's experiences, and they were being shouted down as being fascists and Nazis. There are those elements within the Labour Party, and then there are people like Rosie Duffield, Jess Phillips spoke for Labour Women's Declaration. There are other people in the Labour Party who are serious about women's rights, and the Equality Act was Labour's act. It was one of the last things that they did, and it should protect women's rights and transgender people's rights separately. That's what it was designed to do. And it's been miscommunicated, it's been misused. But, the Labour Party could get back to protecting women's rights and protecting trans rights if they were serious about it.
This takes the fun out of life as well, doesn't it? Because let's be honest, when women go into a restroom together, they chat, they have a bit of a laugh, and they support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at pubs,
nightclubs.
I mean, but there are people who say, well, the toilets in your house are gender neutral, but the toilets in your house are just for you and your family. When you're out late at night and people are drinking, you want to be able to go into the toilet and feel safe. And whether that's having a laugh with your mates or whether it's getting away from, a date that's gone wrong or somebody who's getting too friendly, the women's toilets are a sort of bastion of safety and a refuge.
Well, indeed, and without indulging in any stereotypes, but these are just stories that my female friends have told me. They go into the loo, have a bit of a cry, somebody else supports them, says, what's up, lipstick is borrowed. It's a social experience which is going to be taken away if there are blokes around, especially, as you say, late at night, and those blokes have had a few pints. A friend of mine, Maya, went to a theatre recently which had unisex toilets, and she had to walk past urinals with her daughter with men shaking their willies as they passed. So this is a concern for little girls as well, and you could never send them into the loo on their own anymore, could you?
No, absolutely. It's design that's designed to make women feel uncomfortable and unwelcome in public spaces. And, it's not hard to design toilets that are private and that get, give men urinals, give women cubicles, give people who don't want to use men or women's toilet somewhere else to go. There's nothing against having, a few unisex toilets, but taking all of the signs off the doors and forcing women to walk past urinals and young girls to walk past urinals it's an insult.
Indeed so. Do you think unisex toilets are here to stay? Because I should add that at the conference venue now, they've changed it and they've taken down this curtain in front of the urinals and I think made more of an effort to create a space for women only. I mean, I suppose that would only have happened as a result of the backlash, just like you stood up to your former employers. So what do you think is going to happen? I mean, are people going to get sick of this stuff or is this kind of rather depressing dystopian spectre of unisex toilets here to stay?
Hopefully, I mean, the government has said that they're bringing in a new building code. So for new buildings, they will have to have male and female toilets, and if they have space, a unisex option, which is completely sensible. Most people would support that. So hopefully, if that goes through, then this spectre of all toilets changing to unisex won't be the future. But it doesn't cover schools. And lots of schools have been ripping out their male and female toilets and changing those into unisex. And, for young girls who are going through puberty, having their first periods, it's embarrassing. They should be able to have privacy from boys. And putting them into the same space where the sinks are together, they just don't have the privacy. And, lots of girls are saying they just don't go to the toilet. They don't drink.
And then you have, urinary tract infections, and how are girls at school supposed to study if they can't go and have a wee? It's a true nightmare. But can I congratulate you on everything you've achieved in standing up for women's rights? And Maya, I look forward to our next on-air encounter. My thanks there to Maya Forstatter. Now, coming up in Uncancelled with actor Steve Coogan defending the BBC's latest Jimmy Savile drama, is our state broadcaster guilty of rewriting its own history? I'll be asking Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie. Plus, I'll be asking Kelvin, are the unions going to get even more powerful under a Labour government? But next in a media buzz, as the government promises a clampdown on Sick Note Britain, are some employees now exploiting mental health as an excuse not to go to work? We'll get stuck into that in the media buzz. That's in 2.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Are unisex toilets an insult to women? Big reaction on email, mark@gbnews.com. Jean says, hi, Mark, definitely a no-no. I'd rather hold it in than use unisex toilets. Well done, Jean. You must have a very robust bladder. How about Elizabeth, who says, I don't like dual-sex WCs, and the men appear not to like them either. A very stupid ideology. There was a reason our ancestors kept the sexes apart in certain situations. Those were the days, Elizabeth. Now, let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight in our media buzz, and more front pages have been delivered. And we start with the Mail newspaper. How can the British left make excuses for a terrorist group that murders women and children? That's a piece by Richard Littlejohn. The headline on the front page of the Mail, Hamas, we will kill a hostage for each Israeli attack. Horror threat of filmed executions as troops mass on border, and Benjamin Netanyahu says he has no choice but to launch a ground invasion. The Guardian, we felt the bullets flying around us. Also, Israel declares siege of Gaza as Hamas threatens captives. And Starmer to pledge a new era of devolution for the United Kingdom, because, of course, it went so well last time. And those are your front pages. Let's get full pundit reaction now with Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, in a bid to tackle Britain's spiralling welfare bill and to get more people back to work, Health Secretary Steve Barclay looks set to shake up the current sick note system, with GPs told to treat patients first rather than rushing to sign them off work. It comes after recent figures show that a record 2.5 million Brits are off work due to long-term sickness, with half suffering from mental health issues. So are some people exploiting mental health as an excuse not to go to work? Benjamin?
No. And it takes some audacity from the Health Secretary when there's 7 million people on waiting lists to lecture about this. One of the key reasons, if not the key reason, that so many people are off work sick is because they can't see a doctor. They can't get the appointment for the operation they need. And so the thing that is making them sick carries on, or in many cases, their illnesses have got worse. They've developed mental health illnesses because of that situation. Maybe the Health Secretary should do his job and sort the NHS out before he lectures vulnerable people.
But 5 million people can't be off sick with stress, can they? That's the figure for the number of working-age adults who are not active in the economy. There have got to be people gaming the system, which, by the way, is surely unfair on people with genuine health issues.
Well, first of all, 5 million people aren't off sick with stress, are they?
Well, various ailments. It includes mental health.
Various ailments, including every other description, and the long-term disabled.
Actually, not true, because since 2019, the mental health aspect of that... Oh, I've just realised my hair's a mess.
I quite liked it, actually.
No, I do that just anyway.
She's worried she looks mental.
Ooh, you're in trouble. But it's rocketed since COVID. You can't pretend that since COVID... mental health has suddenly mushroomed, especially among the young. Now,
actually, I think you can.
There is no doctor on the planet that can give you a diagnosis that you're suffering from a mental illness. It doesn't exist, that diagnosis. So a lot of what's done has to be assessed, or your GP doesn't assess it at all. If you say you have mental health issues, well, then you're signed off. That is wrong. It is, if you're fed up, if you're a bit depressed, if you're a bit anxious, that is not a mental health issue. That's just life, frankly. And you can't. And if you're kidding yourself if you think that is not being used now to justify time off for people.
I mean,
because
I think
because you can't prove mental ill health, can you?
Well, of course you can.
You can't.
I've been through them. You get assessments from an occupational therapist. And look,
you get an assessment. There is no proof that you have a mental illness. Yes, if you have schizophrenia, they can almost say 100% you've got it. But all this, everything
or bipolar.
in between, yes, they can diagnose. But usually, when you've had a psychotic episode and you're doing something crazy, then they can.
Right.
But generally, if you just say I've got a mental health issue,
if you're doing something crazy, got you signed off work, I think you'd be off work all the time. But can I just say, you know, I supported lockdowns and I stand by that. But there's no doubt that people saw their mental health get worse as a consequence of that period, and so we shouldn't be surprised that you have some problems.
How long does that go on, do you think? So
well, why don't you ask the people
long
who are
COVID.
affected?
I mean, how long do you think long COVID could go on? Years and...
Let's be honest, I think that the mental health card has sort of become a bit of a sacred cow at the moment. It's a very sensitive topic. You can't really question it.
No, you can't.
God forbid you question anyone who says, you know, they're suffering from a phobia or anxiety. And I'm not diminishing those who genuinely have post-traumatic stress because they've come from war zones. But I think we have stripped the nation of its coping mechanisms. I think we have made being mentally vulnerable almost a righteous thing.
Badge of honour.
A badge of honour. Just imagine what would have happened to this country if all the veterans after the First World War and the Second World War said, not working, I've had a stressful time, we'd have never rebuilt Britain. And the fact that those men, my father was on the, grandfather was on the Burma Railway under the Japanese, and he came back from that war and went at about 8.5 stone. He could have had 2-3 years off to recover, went straight back to his surgery as a doctor to serve the community, to do his duty. And I think we've lost that a little bit now. And I think children are being brought up to pop pills. I mean, children on antidepressants more than they've ever been. That's wrong, because we're conditioning children not to deal with their own mental health.
Belinda, there is a concern about real mental health, and I'm going to mention what you can do if you're struggling. But this is open to exploitation, and this is a massive burden on businesses and ultimately on the taxpayer.
But also, work can help with mental health issues when you get back into being part of society.
Well, I mean, Benjamin's much happier since he's back. Look at you.
But we need to help them and support them get back into life, not keep them on drugs.
Look, while I'm thrilled to be on the sofa, I'm afraid that when you talk about veterans, serious mental health issues are common among them, and we know that generations of veterans went through hell because they didn't get the support and feel able to talk about the mental ill health they've suffered as a consequence of being in war zones.
No, that's a different issue, Ben. I'm not talking down anyone.
Today is going through that sort of problem.
Down anyone.
No one. So, I mean, but there's also
I think veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan might disagree with you.
Well, but they are getting help, and they do have serious mental issues.
I think there's still a massive stigma, especially among heterosexual men, to admit that they're struggling.
But how can a nurse or a school teacher say, you know, I'm going to have to be off for a year, off sick, I mean, off as a result of stress?
Well, you don't know what they're going through, and you know the truth is that I think if we really wanted to tackle this, we change the toxic culture, the toxic masculinity in this country that drives men to have the highest rates of deaths under 40 being suicide.
There's a big difference between anxiety and post-traumatic stress.
Men in this country are taking their own lives because of mental ill health.
That's a different subject.
Well, it's not, because you're talking about
staying at home.
You're saying they're not having mental health struggles.
They have a phobia of pencils.
OK. Well, last word.
Just going to say, there's a modern demand for happiness in society now. People think, if I'm not happy, I've got mental health issues. That's not the case.
OK.
Just not the case.
Look, if any of the issues that we've discussed are affecting you, you can contact the mental health charity Samaritans for support. They do a brilliant job. Coming up, as Jeremy Corbyn refuses to call Hamas terrorists after the hideous atrocities against Israeli citizens at the weekend, how bad would the situation have been if he was Prime Minister? My panel discussed that in Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in Uncancelled, with the actor Steve Coogan defending the BBC's latest Jimmy Savile drama, is our state broadcaster guilty of rewriting their own checkered history? Plus, is Labour about to give more power to the unions? Surely they've already held us to ransom. I'll be asking the Wolf of Fleet Street, Kelvin Mackenzie. He's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's time now for Uncancelled, and this man will not be cancelled or silenced. Comedian Steve Coogan launched a dramatic defence of the BBC over their new Jimmy Savile drama, The Reckoning, that sees Coogan portray the paedophile children's entertainer. The BBC has come under fire after omitting the scandal following Savile's death, in which executives shelved a Newsnight investigation revealing him to be a sexual predator, with Dame Priti Patel accusing the Beeb of trying to rewrite the past. But speaking on Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, the actor defended the drama against accusations it gives the Beeb an easy ride over the scandal.
Do you think the BBC has learned lessons from the way he might have been enabled in this organisation and will continue to learn further valuable lessons?
It's always difficult when an institution has to be culpable. My initial concern was, are they trying to go easy on themselves? And Jeff, the producer, said, no, quite the reverse. They want to put their feet to the fire.
Well, let's get reaction from the Wolf of Fleet Street himself, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, listen, let's talk about this. Now, I think this drama is a great idea for a TV show, but I don't think the Beeb should have made it.
They're the wrong people to make it. I mean, they've had their hand in the blood for about 30-odd years with Jimmy Savile. They would have heard all the allegations. In the old days, when a runner or even a sort of mini producer made a complaint, nobody took any notice. If it happened today, anybody who tried it on, boom, they'd be out the door straight away. In my time, we ran the story saying that Jimmy Savile, who was working at Broadmoor as a kind of freelance, wheeling people about, right, actually, the nurses didn't like it. They didn't like the atmosphere. They thought he had too much ability to go anywhere and, quotes, do anything. Anyway, so we run the story. What happened? Jimmy Savile sued us. The nurses were scared to then come forward, right, because they would lose all their jobs. We ended up having to write him a cheque for 25 grand. As it was, he was actually abusing these people who are criminally insane. Now, once that had happened, nobody ever went after Jimmy Savile again, because they said, well, if the Sun doesn't stand up for it, what's going to happen? So he manages to die at 82 or 83. He was never called to justice. And the truth about the matter is, it would have been much better done if Netflix had done it, or even if ITV had done it. The idea that BBC, keep quiet about that, or that man over there's made an allegation, that woman, forget about that. Just forget that, right? And so I didn't agree with Coogan's analysis, but he was being paid by the BBC. He's bound to defend them.
Go figure. I mean, did you smell a rat with Savile over the years? Did you think something wasn't right about this guy?
Yeah, anybody who'd had anything to do with him would say there's something not right. But to be honest with you, just thought he was a weirdo. He constantly talked about his mum. He had a load of money and yet lived in some council flat in Leeds. There was a whole loads of things which were madness, but nobody thought that he was abusing people of both sexes at every opportunity for the best part of 40-odd years. Nobody thought that. And as I say, the time that the Sun did call him out, it cost us 25 grand plus lawyers' fees. That, you know, that was enough to see everybody else out.
Yeah, well, you did your bit to try to call into account, but he had friends in the police force, didn't he? He had friends in the media.
Had friends at Number 10.
Number 10, right?
And also had friends at the Palace.
And the Palace. A close personal friendship with King Charles.
Yes, he did.
So, listen, let's talk about Labour, who are likely to win the next election, and they will hand more power to the unions. Surely a concern, given the fact that this year the country has been held to ransom by those unions.
Yes, I mean, you know, today the deputy leader is announcing, you know, honestly, we're with you and we're with you, the unions, and on day one we're going to introduce X, Y, and Z. The issue about that is what's going to happen now is the doctors have been told. Actually, Wes Streeting told the doctors today, "Don't worry about it, mate. If that dispute is still going on when we get in, we're going to give you the money. The RMT, we're going to give you the money. There'll be, by the way, the basic pay of the country." Is going to take inflation into account for the first time. Everybody will be on 150 grand a year, right? Asia is already eating our lunch. I guarantee we become uncompetitive. There's bags of bad work coming our way. My bet, Labour, because of social media and various other things, is a 5-year term. Once people start sitting in it and they think, oh, my God, unless I don't know, why are they even appealing to the trade unions? They're being paid for them. But the reason there's only 5 million of them. Our workforce is over 30 million. You'd have thought they would try to be on side the other 25 million who are funding these ridiculous public sector pay rises.
Well, you've got extra costs for business, which is going to be the living wage will go up, plus getting rid of 0 hours contracts, which many people are happy to be on.
Yeah, they like 0 hours.
I think you had me on one of those when I was at Talk Radio. Anyway, but...
Well, I preferred to get you on the no hours contract, but you kept turning up.
You know what? Working for you, that was an argument for a union. But the bottom line is that it's extra costs for business, and it sounds to me like inflation and unemployment down the line.
Well, don't even worry about that. Unemployment is heading our way now. We are in, as a country, we are in a lot of trouble, right? We are living beyond our means. Finally, the bills come in, and I'm afraid companies are already starting to lay people off. So expect by this is another reason why Labour are probably going to get in. By the time the general election takes place, we're saying in November of next year. Yeah. I expect I think we're around about 3.9 or whatever we are, 4%. I reckon it will be nearer 5.25. It's going to go up sharply. People are going to be slung out of their work.
Perhaps, though, Rachel Reeves struck the right tone today, where she was quite prudent, wasn't she? The sort of Gordon Brown 2.0. I mean, she didn't really spend any money in her speech today. It was going to be businesses would carry the cost. So maybe Labour are getting prudent.
I doubt it. They're saying they're going to be.
They're going to go. Everything's going to be signed off by the OBR.
Well, that's what they say. All this old cobblers, you know. And then at the end of the day, they'll swerve round it. You know, in the end of the day, Hunt said that the spending is going to add 28 billion a year forever. I don't know whether those numbers are true. What I do know is that Labour can't not spend. They have to spend other people's money. However, we've had the idiot Conservatives have been doing it literally for the last few years.
Correct.
So they're in a very difficult position. Anyway, we'll have a few years of Labour. It'll be an absolute catastrophe, and then we'll be back to Dan Wootton running the party.
Well, listen, you could do worse. Kelvin, brilliant stuff as always. Let me offer some balance in regards to our discussion about the BBC. Charlotte Moore, the BBC's head of content, defended the decision to end the drama without dramatising the cover-up, saying that's another story to be told. It's well documented what happened. We were very clear about the purpose of this story. You have to choose which part of the story to tell and why. Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, let's crack on now. And let me tell you that it's time for your nominations for Union Jackass and Greatest Britain. So, Carol, who's your Greatest Britain today?
Mine is businessman Colin Kemp, who's 76. He's launched a campaign to raise 70 grand for a statue to honour the 17,000 Royal Navy sailors who died helping free more than 150,000 slaves in 60 years in the 19th century. You know, we get a lot of chest beating and hysteria over reparations, but we don't hear much about this, about the fact that Britain helped end the slave trade, and the Royal Navy in particular was instrumental in stopping slaves being transported. So yeah, this is fantastic. Colin says Britain has very little to apologise for, and he's right. No one alive today was harmed by anyone who is alive today. We can't be held responsible for what happened 200 years ago. So good on Colin, and I suspect he'll raise his money quite quickly.
Great shout. Benjamin, your hero of the day.
Mine is the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, who spoke at Labour conference today. And she gave an absolute...
Have you got malaria?
You're not well. He's not well.
I know there's some bugs in that jungle, but what are you on about?
Well, I was really impressed by how she talked about the fact that, you know, she is someone who grew up with a single mother who was seriously ill.
She's always talking about that.
Well, you know what? You
My
might
father
dismiss
was a toolmaker.
You lot might, you know, millionaires sitting in TV studios might dismiss
working class as
a working class woman who's gone on to be the next Deputy Prime Minister. But I think that's a compelling and impressive story, and any decent person would say, good on you, girl.
Well, she has done very well, and I've got to say, she's a formidable politician. How about you, Belinda? Who is your greatest Briton?
Mine, I had to give him credit where credit's due. It's Rishi Sunak that I've made as my greatest Brit. I know. I may never make him it again. We will see. But it's for showing solidarity to Israel by putting the Israeli flag up on 10 Downing Street while it was going through the most horrific attack from Islamic extremists and the slaughter of so many innocent civilians. And I thought that was the right thing to do, and his call to put it on government buildings. So.
Well, I will declare Rishi Sunak the winner of tonight's Greatest Britain. Carol, briefly, if you can, your union jackass.
Jeremy Corbyn. This is the man, Keir Starmer, you'll remember, loyally backed to be Prime Minister. He was asked time and time again over the last couple of days to condemn what his, quotes, friends in Hamas had done in Israel, and he refused point blank to say it. Don't forget, back in 2009, he said the government had been wrong to prescribe Hamas as a terrorist organisation. He said they were dedicated to bringing peace to the two nations. Yeah, so tell that to the men, women, grandmas, grandfathers who've been slaughtered in the past 48 hours.
Benjamin, your union jackass.
Mine is the TV presenter Mark Dolan.
I beg your pardon.
You are my union jackass, because in last night's monologue, you declared that Sadiq Khan had failed to call Hamas terrorists on his Twitter feed, somewhere he posts a lot. That was completely false. He'd done so 36 hours before, and I think it was stirring up unnecessary unease for the Jewish community, who generally feel that Sadiq Khan's done a very good job, and I think you should correct the record.
Well, let me tell you that in my monologue, I said on air that his office had said that Hamas were a terrorist group, that he'd communicated through his office. But it remains the case that on his personal Twitter, with over 1 million followers, he has not tweeted anything on this subject.
This is nonsense.
No,
the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, tweeted at 12 o'clock on Saturday that Hamas are terrorists.
If
Why
we're
don't you
dealing
correct
with
the
facts,
record, Mark?
let me tell you, he tweeted about it on his mayor account, but on his personal account with 1 million followers. But yes, he has condemned Hamas, so fair play. And Belinda, briefly.
So my jackass, it's got to be David Lammy, not just for wanting to date the EU or that rubbish he was coming out with today.
OK, we're out of time. We're back tomorrow. I think we can all guess why. Headliners is next. See you soon.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We'll see some patchy low cloud and fog developing, particularly across southern parts of England and Wales, but further heavy rain pushing into Scotland. That's courtesy of weather fronts pushing through over the next few days. This weather front, a dividing line between warm air to the south and colder air trying to come into the north by the middle of the week. We've already got that cloud and rain spilling into parts of Northern Ireland, pushing into western Scotland as we move through this evening into the early hours. Elsewhere, turning quite grey. There'll be some mist and low cloud developing by the end of the night, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. And fairly mild temperatures for all staying up in double figures. So it's a wet start across Scotland to start Tuesday morning. Outbreaks of heavy rain, which will continue to push slowly southeastwards through the day here. So we could see some further flooding issues. Brightening up across parts of England and Wales. Some low cloud, though, lingering across southern counties. Plenty of hazy sunshine here, lifting temperatures to around 23 or 24. Turning increasingly windy across the northern half of the UK as weather fronts push in. Those weather fronts slowly push their way southwards into Wednesday, turning heavy at times, particularly across parts of Wales. Further north, brighter sunny spells and scattered showers, particularly across northwest Scotland. Some of these heavy at times, quite muggy across southern parts of the UK under that cloud and rain. A bit fresher further north and turning cooler as we head towards the weekend.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
You with GB News, the top story. The Israeli Prime Minister says atrocities committed by Hamas during its attack on Israel at the weekend mirrored those carried out by ISIS. Speaking this evening, Benjamin Netanyahu issued a televised statement saying that the airstrikes in Gaza are just the beginning of Israel's retaliation. Earlier, Hamas threatened to kill Israeli hostages if Israel continued to bomb Gaza without warning. More than 900 people have been killed in Israel so far and over 550 in Gaza since the first attack on Saturday. And in a significant expansion to the conflict, Hezbollah Islamists in Lebanon, which is north of Israel, have fired rockets in what they describe as revenge attacks for Israel, killing 4 of their fighters. Meanwhile, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters have been demonstrating outside the Israeli embassy in central London tonight. Within the last 15 minutes, the Metropolitan Police said that had now moved on and the protests had been wrapped up. But early this evening, if you're watching on television, you can see there are waving Palestinian flags, free Palestinian banners and fireworks being let off as chants of Israel is a terrorist state rang out. The Metropolitan Police said it was looking into suspected criminal damage. Well, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has attended a prayer service tonight in a synagogue, reaffirming the UK's unwavering support for Israel. And the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government will also stand by Israel.
Reaffirmed our support to Israel in its self-defence against this terrorist attack perpetrated by Hamas against unarmed civilians in many instances. This is an ongoing situation, and of course we will be reviewing our support to Israel and of course British nationals in Israel as the situation progresses.
Well, in politics today, the Shadow Chancellor said Labour was ready to rebuild Britain and restore economic security after what she called the chaos of the Tory years. Speaking at the Labour Party conference, Rachel Reeves said Labour plans